And so there's this whole gap of moving from saying that you value something to actually owning it.
Okay, so why not? Why don't people want to close
Because
the gap?
that's where the pain is. When you have disappointment, you have to grieve. And people a lot of times will associate grief just with loss. I didn't get the job or whatever, whatever it is. There's a measure to which we have to feel the feelings of grief when we experience disappointment. We think courage looks like being fearless. And I think courage is doing the thing that you want to do and are called to do and know you're supposed to do, even when your knees are shaking, even when you can't sleep the night before.
Right.
I think that's what courage actually is. And the actual core is I'm afraid of being out of control. So then asking yourself the question, well, what happens when I'm out of control or when I don't have control? And what do I need to feel safe?
Wow.
With the fact that I don't have control.
What if there truly are no limitations? What if miracles are possible? How do we live in that arena? Only when you set your mind.
Welcome to Set Your Mind podcast. This is the podcast where you will learn how to set your mind. You will learn how to navigate life above and not below these circumstances. Today, I have a guest. She is a good friend. When I moved to Georgia in 2011, she was my first friend, actually. Laura is the owner of Armour Leadership Coaching. She is an executive coach, and Laura teaches leaders how to maximize their potential. I am honored to have Laura here today.
It's so good to be here,
Welcome.
Jenny. Yeah, this is fun.
Awesome. Okay, so tell me what that means. Maximize leadership potential.
Yeah, I think all of us have within us this untapped natural strength, unique strength. A lot of times I'll refer to it as you have this inner uniqueness. And I think we're all driven to maximize that. We all want to have some sort of impact on the world, whether it's worldwide or even just within our own little sphere of influence. And I love coming alongside leaders and helping them discover not only their unique strengths and attributes, but then how to leverage those and maximize those to really go after their goals, to see their vision become reality. And I tend to take things that are kind of more theoretical or 20,000 foot view, and let's make it really, really practical. Because I think theory isn't going to get us where we want to go. We need actionable steps. And that's what I love doing with leaders.
I love it. Okay, so tell me your journey. How did you become a leadership coach? And listening to that makes me think you're in the right space because you're one of the most practical people I know, and You're really smart. So you being a leadership coach makes total sense. How did you get to this space?
Yeah, I started maybe 15 years ago, 14 years ago, something like that. I started in the world with Strength Finders. And I have always been a curious person. I've always asked a lot of questions. People will ask me a question and I answer with a question. And when I started diving into Strength Finders, I used to hate personality assessments. I felt like they put me in a box. I didn't like people telling me who I was. I wanted to tell people who I was. But when I took that assessment and actually got coached in my results, it was the first time I really felt seen and known. It was really the first time I felt understood and was able to kind of weave together this story of who I was on the inside and recognize that it was unique to the other people around me. And then I naturally started seeing those uniqueness things in other people too. So I started out as a strengths coach. And then I really started diving into kind of like purpose discovery. I worked with a lot of people who were in some sort of transition in life. They were going through a career change. Maybe they had been a stay-at-home mom and now they're going back into the workplace, even like college students, and really fell in love with helping people find kind of that unique purpose and then putting it into action steps so that it would become reality. And then 2 years ago, I got my master's in executive coaching and consulting with the Townsend Institute and really fell in love with this side of leadership and equipping, coming alongside leaders in their growth. Because I think a lot of times you get a promotion based on what you've done in your workplace, but no one actually prepares you to lead the team that you're now promoted over,
Right.
or maybe you're a VP level moving up to a C-suite, and no one actually coaches you or trains you on what those changes and transitions actually require of you as a person.
Okay.
And it's almost this like on the job training. So I love coming alongside people in those transitions and kind of helping them navigate that.
Interesting. Okay. So when you have a leader come to you, are you like, let's hit the internal? Because I imagine most people want the results. They want, let's get to the end result.
Yeah.
How do you even navigate the internal world of your clients?
Yeah. So with coaching, I think, and one thing that kind of separates counseling and coaching is for my world, the client really is in the driver's seat. And so I'm going to come alongside you in your growth process and meet you where you're at. Now, I have my own internal catalog almost of coaching skills and even these internal principles, ideas, trainings that I can weave in as we're talking about the different problems that you're encountering as a leader and things like that. And so through curiosity, through questions, you can start to bring some of those things to the surface. But ultimately, the client's really in the driving seat, and I am bringing kind of my own expertise along, not to consult, but really to be a thought partner with my clients. And I think a lot of times leaders don't have the privilege of that. If you're at the top, there's no one for you to necessarily process within your organization or within your team, because you have to show up a certain way. And so to have someone externally who has that knowledge, but also has the coaching skills, the curiosity, the accountability that they can bring to the table, I think is really helpful for leaders in whatever process they find themselves in. So we can get super, super practical. And I have yet to see where the internal stuff doesn't eventually come up. And it's always led by the client.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay. So it's like a spiritual journey, coaching.
Yeah, in a way.
Ultimately.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you use tools? Do you have modules and tools that you see the navigation coming to a certain place, and I'm going to bring out StrengthsFinder. I'm going to bring out, I don't know, what else? What are some tools? What do you use?
Yeah, there's some great assessments out there, and I think some of those are really helpful. One of my favorite tools to use, and typically what I'll do is I will ask a client either in the initial conversation about what coaching could look like, hey, here's some tools that I think might be helpful. But one of my favorite things to do is a 360, because I think we don't know what we don't know. And when we can get that honest, open feedback from people in our life, especially when it's people in different spheres of our life. So when I'm getting feedback from my friends, but also my coworkers, but also my boss, and even my spouse, then if I have someone, I'm not having to sort through the feedback to understand it. Someone else is kind of sorting through it and bringing those themes.
Okay, so this is 360? Explain that. Like, exactly. What is that module?
Yeah. So a 360, there's a lot of different, I think, companies that offer them. The idea of a 360 is if you're at the center, you're getting a 360-degree view of yourself. So you're going to ask people in your life, in all different parts of your life, to kind of answer the same question. So it might be a questionnaire that they're filling out. It might be some sort of like assessment that they're taking, but they're answering questions about you. It would be things like, describe this person's communication style. How do they handle failure? How do they handle success? And so you're asking for that. And the feedback is anonymous. So the feedback from all of those people goes to the coach, and the coach compiles it all. So you're not hearing specifically that your boss said this about you.
Oh, you have no idea who said it.
You have no idea who said it, because the goal is anonymity so that they're being as honest as possible. And then the coach is actually the filter who kind of like sorts it all and says, here are the 3 themes that have come out from your 360. I love that as an initial tool because it really gives an eye-opening look into how you show up in the world. And that's the interesting thing, is that you go everywhere you go, but you have no idea how you're showing up if you don't get feedback from the people that are interacting with you.
Wow.
because we think we show up a certain way, right?
Right.
And we have our intentions on the inside, and we're really aware, or a lot of us are really aware of those. But how our intentions translate into people's reception of us is not always the same thing.
Right.
Which is why we have fights, which is why we have miscommunication, which is why we argue with our spouse, right? I think I'm showing up one way. He receives me as a different way.
Okay.
And if I don't actually hear that from him, then we're almost missing each other, right? Because I think A, he thinks B, and actually the reality is C.
Okay, interesting. So do you have real life examples of modules and a big transformation from that?
Yeah. So when I was in grad school, we did like an internship. So we had to walk through a really specific client agreement. So we found someone who was willing to be our guinea pig.
Okay.
And so the first thing we did was a 360.
Okay.
And what I thought was so cool was how uniform the feedback was, even from his coworkers to some of his clients,
Wow.
to friends. And as I kind of compiled it and shared it with him, the way that it opened his eyes to see different things. He was a guy who very much a perfectionist, would have admitted to being a perfectionist, but I think didn't even see how much people believed in him and how much the way he was showing up and always kind of criticizing his failures, even though it was just because it was like a lack of, it wasn't perfect, but it was like 98%, I don't think he could even see how painful that was for other people, because other people in his life so wanted to celebrate him.
Okay.
And there was this like disconnect between him being able to receive that and people being able to give it, if that makes sense, because it wasn't 100%. And so to be able to hear that from other people and that it was like uniform across the board, I think was really eye-opening.
Okay, so that's positive feedback. Did you have any that were like, this person is wretched, and how do you deliver that information?
Yeah. So there's always, I will say this, I have never worked with anyone where the feedback was only negative.
Okay.
I would assume that if someone is seeking out help for growth,
that's true.
That there's going to be some sort of value for change. Right.
Yeah.
And so I would say the people who are only ever going to receive negative feedback probably aren't in the boat to ask the question, which is the problem, and so I have yet to encounter anyone who only had positive or only had negative.
Oh.
And I think that's the reality that we all face, right? We have to integrate the fact that I show up in the world, and sometimes I show up positively and sometimes I show up negatively.
Yeah.
And there are reasons for all of it. We can talk about everything that happens on the inside because of that. But I have to accept that. Otherwise, I will never be able to move forward in my growth if I can't honor both the positive and the negative.
Right. There's honesty there. There's vulnerability and
real.
honesty. Yeah.
Yeah. And if we even if we just pause for a second, think about everyone that you interact with.
Yeah.
Right? There's going to be some sort of sliding scale. They're never all negative and they're never all positive.
Right.
Yeah. Especially the people that you're deeper in relationship with and more connected to, we all have a mixture of both. And so if we can actually accept that about ourselves, then we actually position ourselves to do things to maximize the positive and do the improvements we need around the negative.
Interesting. Okay. So what do you see patterns amongst leaders of issues? Like, what are some of the biggest issues that leaders face? You mentioned isolation, not being able to have a coach, have somebody to lean on. But okay, now they have a coach. They've gotten to the place where they're ready to heal or grow or whatever the journey is that they're on. What's the biggest issue that you see when you're dealing with people?
Yeah, I think it'll vary based on the industry. But I would say if I had to pick one overarching issue for leaders. I think leaders believe the lie that they have to show up perfectly in the world.
That's good.
And if you think about it, I would actually, and most people would much rather follow someone who's willing to admit their failures, who's authentic.
Yeah.
And so versus someone who is the like perfection of I never make a mistake, because there's something in us that doesn't trust that.
Wow. That's so good.
And so I think the temptation for leaders is to move away from vulnerability because it makes you look weak.
Yeah.
I think the reality is that vulnerability buys your trust with your team. And once they trust you, they'll do anything for you. You know?
Wow. Okay. So help me. How do you bring a leader who's a perfectionist, who's got all their ducks in a row, they've got their A game, they are starting to have a realization there's issues. How do you bring them from a mindset of perfectionism into a mindset of authenticity and vulnerability when all they know is I better be strong, I better show up, I can't let people know I've got issues.
Yeah.
So how do you even make us, now I think you're a safe space.
Sure.
So I can see a leader being totally vulnerable with you, but how do they take you? I agree with you. You know, I'm a leader now. I'm a vulnerable leader with Laura, but how do you be a vulnerable leader with your team?
Yeah.
You know?
So I think it starts with being a vulnerable leader with Laura. And so if you have someone who has never felt safe to be vulnerable anywhere, right? They have to start somewhere.
Okay.
Which I think is the benefit of a coach a lot of times is because I am external to your organization.
Yeah.
You know, you can't screw it up with me because I'm here to serve you. You're paying me.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
My job isn't tied to your success.
Right. That's beautiful.
In the same way that like shareholders would be or direct reports would be, right?
Yeah.
And so you start to first give them the experience of what vulnerability does for them so that they can start to recognize what it feels like and recognize even the benefits of it. If it's only in theory, it will never happen because we don't know what it is, right? We don't know what it looks like on the inside. We don't know what it feels like. We don't know how to shift into that energy. And so I think it starts with having a relationship where you can be vulnerable. And then from there, it's kind of creating a plan alongside with the client of, okay, well, where else? Now where do we take it to like the next level? Where else would feel safe? Where maybe you could try with your executive leadership team. What would it look like to bring a measure of vulnerability there? One of the things I like to do with clients is kind of let's identify a starting place. So 0 to 10, 10 being I am the most vulnerable, 0, I have no vulnerability. Where are you starting? And then where do you want to get to?
Okay.
So that you kind of, because a lot of these things are intangible, right? And so it makes it really difficult to measure or track success.
Yeah.
Because it's not like the same way I would if I was lifting weights.
Right.
I can track it of like, well, I'm at 10 pounds now, I'm at 20.
Right.
And so we need to create a similar thing for these intangibles. And so you have to find somewhere where it can start. And then once you have something where it has started, then you just slowly grow it from there.
Wow. All right. So then what about the people that get too into it, right? They're like, oh, I'm free. I can be vulnerable.
Yeah.
How do you train them to not be too loosey-goosey, but you have to, like, where's the line? How do you teach them the line?
Yeah.
Because their line has been so extreme perfectionism. And now, I mean, I'm just talking about maybe
like
the personality. Yeah. If you swing the pendulum where you're like way too emotional. Now you're the boss that's way too emotional.
Yeah.
How do you even navigate that for them and help them navigate that?
Yeah, I think what you're describing is this idea that extremes are bad on both sides. Or let me say it this way, not bad. I don't like calling things good or bad. Extremes are not helpful.
Right.
And oftentimes extremes, if we swing the pendulum one way to the other, is almost a trauma response or like a fear response, right?
Okay.
We see that we did something bad.
Yeah.
quote unquote, or wrong. We made a mistake. So then we overcorrect.
Interesting.
And the goal is actually to find the healthy middle, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And so I think sometimes when you have someone who tends to be more, maybe go to the extremes, it's actually helping them kind of create their own boundaries, and create those own, almost like riverbanks.
Okay.
And the goal is that you're actually finding, this healthy middle, because there is a place where, if you're in a certain position, your direct reports are not going to hear about this, shouldn't be hearing about the state of your marriage.
Right. Right.
And so I think the other thing that's important is not only kind of defining those banks, but making sure that the person has the support that they need so that they actually have a space where they're fully seen and known, whether it starts with me. But I like how Dr. Townsend will talk about having a life team. And it can't just be your spouse and your dog.
Okay.
It has to be, you have to do this with people.
Okay.
And I would say that probably one of the biggest lies that people believe about growth, especially internal growth, is that you can do it alone. And you can't.
Good.
You have to do it with people. Now, doesn't mean that every person you meet is your new BFF who's going to hear about the depths of your soul.
Okay.
You have to be able to discern, almost like DTR, like the relationship, discern what type of relationship this is and how you need to show up.
Yeah.
But I think what becomes key is that you have people in your life who know everything about you. They may not be your coworker. So you have to go find a friend, or you have to find a family member or a mentor or something like that who's outside of it, because you need that.
Right.
And if you don't have it, it may start to overflow into other relationships and it can cause other problems. But growth will never happen alone.
That's powerful. That's super powerful. Okay. So if you have a client who has trust issues, there is no friend. Where do you navigate that?
Yeah.
How do you take them from, I trust my husband or my spouse and nobody else?
Yeah.
The spouse and the dog,
Yeah. So I think it has to start with, they have to want it. And we all hit a point with our growth where our pain exceeds our fear of change.
Yeah.
And so actually helping bring awareness as a coach for my clients to those moments with questions, it's really hard to hide.
Yeah.
When you, trust someone and they're asking you questions. Like if I'm meeting with someone regularly and they have allowed me and I've done my job to build trust and rapport and safety with them.
Yeah.
It's really hard to hide from those questions.
Yeah.
Because I'm seeing things and I'm asking them.
Yeah.
Which I think is part of the beauty. That's what the beauty of accountability is, right? Is that you can't hide.
Right.
It's not meant to be this like tight rule enforcing reenactment of elementary school, where walk in a straight line, make sure you keep your hands to yourself. That's not what accountability is supposed to be. It's supposed to be safe, a safe place where you can be vulnerable, but where you can't hide.
Yeah.
And where it actually kind of enforces these boundaries that you've even set for yourself, where you start to, I know that Jenny's going to ask me that question. So what am I going to do about that?
Right. Wow. Okay. So it sounds like you deal with a lot of really powerful truths, honestly. Like you bring powerful truths to your clients. Okay. So what would you say some of the most important truths are that you bring to people? What are the lies they're believing as leaders? And what are the truths? You mentioned perfectionism, but what are other patterns you're seeing within leadership?
Yeah, I think, so I mentioned one lie already, that growth, we believe growth can happen alone.
Right.
So I think that that's a huge lie.
Yeah.
That people believe. I think I would also say that we have this stereotype of a leader. And it's probably more specific to American culture, if I'm being honest. And I don't think that every leader fits that stereotype. And I think if you are someone who doesn't fit that stereotype, meaning like climb the corporate ladder, white male, persona,
Yeah.
who's like the visionary and
Right.
like, come follow me. And we think that that is leadership.
Okay.
And I would actually argue that the definition of leadership is influence. And so I'm a leader in my home because I have influence with my children.
Right.
I'm a leader in my community if I have influence with my neighbors.
Right.
Not control, but
Yeah.
influence.
Yeah.
And influence comes from relationship. So again, kind of going back to, we can't grow alone. We have to be in relationship.
So, all right. I'm curious about, I love that definition of leaders being those who have influence, because I was writing notes recently and I said leaders are those who have ownership.
Yeah.
It's like they care about it enough to make a difference, or they're going to facilitate the team and get them in action, and they're going to make things happen. So it's like this space of ownership, and you can have ownership in your house, and you can have ownership in your business and all this stuff.
Well, and even think about it like that takes the lid off of any requirements for leadership. My 9-year-old can be a leader if she takes ownership of her classroom at school.
Yeah.
If she and seeks to have influence through relationship with her classmates and even with her teacher, you know, and you do it respectfully. You know, it's not like, again, we think of it as coming and trying and taking over.
Yeah.
But if it's actually like stewardship and ownership, and I'm just going to come in and be a part and be connected,
right.
And then bring who I am and actually call who you are out of you.
Yeah.
Versus me telling you what to do.
Yeah.
It's so much more powerful. And then honestly, then anyone can be a leader.
Right. Okay. Talk to me about the power of, because what you said is influence, and that is relational.
Yes.
That's more than ownership.
Yes.
Ownership's just responsibility, taking responsibility as a person. But influence is connection to people.
Yes.
Okay, so talk to me about connection to people and how we can grow stronger connections to people, what you see when you're coaching with leaders. How do you navigate connection to staff, to vendors, to whoever they're dealing with? What do you coach people about connection?
Yeah. So I'm actually working with a client now, and one of the things she's trying to grow in is she has some difficult coworker relationships. And I think it's really important when we think about connection and relationship is that there are different types of relationship, different levels of relationship. And so sometimes we go into that with the mindset of everyone has to become my new best friend. And that's not true.
Right.
Now, I think it's really important that we maintain authenticity as we're going through it. Anyone can sniff out an agenda. You know, like you get a sales call and you know that you don't care anything about my need. You just want to make money on whatever you're selling, right?
Right.
So we have to be careful that we check our agenda at the door. But I think we also have to be realistic about the type of relationship that we're building with people. So my relationship with my coworker is going to have different requirements on it, different time commitments, different levels of vulnerability than my relationship with my husband.
Okay.
Or hopefully,
right.
if we're doing anything healthy in our marriage.
Right.
And so I think recognizing that and having honest conversations and expectations with ourselves, not only in what we expect from others in relationship, but what we are able and willing to give, you know?
Yeah.
And I think the other piece of it is that connection has to be authentic. It can't be transactional.
That's big.
And so making sure that there's some sort of like unifying goal or unifying why behind it, you know?
Yeah.
Like if I don't like my coworker, if we just personality wise, if we don't get along, but I have a greater goal of having a collaborative work environment, right?
That's good. Yeah.
Then I'm going to bring myself to that relationship. I'm not going to come and try to be his or her best friend.
Yeah.
But I'm going to come and try to be the best coworker I can be. Because the last piece I would say about relationships is you can only control you.
Right.
And we try really, really hard to protect ourselves from other people hurting us by manipulating or coercing people, and we don't even realize it. Right.
Right.
And so if I can show up authentically if I can show up, it actually doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah.
I can only control me. So I bring the best version of me within the type of relationship, right? That this is going to be. And then if and when I do get hurt or whatever, I have other relationships to go and get those wounds healed, which is why it's important to have that life team or those other connections where you're really, really seen and known. That doesn't have to be my coworker. Now, it could if she's my best friend.
Right.
But we have to be realistic with the expectations we put on different types of relationships.
Right.
Both for ourselves and for other people.
That's so powerful. I love it. Because when you're saying that you have a unifying goal, it makes me think of a company having a vision and a mission.
Yeah.
Because then you're all on page together.
Yeah.
You're working towards something. And so that actually is the part of the company culture that is spiritual and allows for connection, right?
Yeah. And we all know the companies who have those. Like we can think of different companies where even us as consumers on the outside know the vision or mission and have a sense of the company culture.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that those things are easy, right?
Yeah.
And doesn't mean that those things come without work or effort. But I think it's really, really important that when we hear pursuing a relationship and connection to even build that trust and vulnerability, that doesn't mean that someone is your best friend.
Right. Yeah.
And so it's okay that you don't open every part of your heart to them.
Yeah.
Or every part of your dreams and, all those kind of things. But figuring out what can I give you of me? And what would be the best version of this relationship so that we can move forward in what it needs to be.
That's good. Okay. Talk to me about boundaries. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Because I'm really, everybody come and be my friend. You know me.
Yes.
Everybody come to the party, come to the table, come be my friend. And I have had to grow and learn. Everybody is not your friend.
Everyone is not your friend, and not out of malice.
Right.
Everyone has a capacity.
Right. Okay.
Now, some people's capacities are smaller. So you have some people, like if we use StrengthsFinder as a context for this, right? You have some people who are relators. They want to go really, really, really deep in relationship, but they're only going to do that with a few people.
Yeah.
And then you have woo, winning others over,
Yeah.
Who love to maximize as many connections as possible. They get the energy infilling from that icebreaker moment, right?
Yep.
But they don't go as deep.
Yep.
And then you have people who are kind of some sort of mixture of the two.
Okay.
So it's important that we realize everyone has a different capacity for relationships. So if I bring my understanding of my own capacity and then define that as normal or good, I have then judged everyone else who doesn't have my relational capacity.
It's powerful.
Either whether it's small or big.
Yeah.
And so there's a degree to which I have to differentiate and separate, which is boundaries, and understand what I need and am capable of, and then get to know where we are different and what you need and are capable of. And if I hold you to my standards without recognizing that you have a different capacity, it's unfair.
That's big. I mean, that's so big to me. And I encounter this with people. They have expectations.
Yes.
And their expectations are so high. Why aren't they picking up the phone? I picked up the phone and called them. Why aren't they calling me back?
Yeah.
Coach me out of that. Coach me out of that place. Coach me out. Well, so I'm a visionary, and I'm not even talking. I'm out of the space of having expectations with people, but I still have expectations on situations. I have expectations where I believe the best. My cup is not just half full, it's overflowing. And then when the best doesn't happen, it defeats me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
are you talking about the pain that you are experiencing from disappointed expectations, or the pain that other people experience by you not fulfilling their expectations?
That's a good question. I'm talking about it's all selfish. I'm talking about selfish.
No, right. It's not selfish.
I mean, I'm talking about the way that I'm wired, and the way, I've seen people do it with other people, and I don't know how to coach them out of that.
Sure.
Because I see that, and I'm all I can think is like, let it be, like the let go theory, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just chill out. Like, don't put that on them.
Yeah.
Let them do their thing, move on.
Mm-hmm.
And that's big in our world right now with that book being so popular with Mel Robbins, obviously we have an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So help me with the people that put expectations on people and then expectations on things.
So I'm going to make a statement instead of asking you a question because I don't want to
uncover make a statement.
My statement is, I think and no one's going to want to hear this.
Okay, let me hear this.
When you have disappointment, you have to grieve. And people a lot of times will associate grief just with loss. Someone died, I didn't get the job or whatever, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So there's a measure to which we have to feel the feelings of grief when we experience disappointment. Okay. So that can look like, I thought that this relationship with this friend was going to evolve into something more. And she didn't have that to give. We don't consider that worthy of grieving.
It feels small.
Because it feels small, it feels insignificant. We tell ourselves, I should just get over it.
Yeah.
Right. But if we actually allow ourselves to feel the feelings of grief, which are sadness.
Yeah.
Man, I really thought that she was going to be my next best friend or a really good maybe connection for my business or whatever the type of relationship it is, right? So even these little disappointments will build up over time and create feelings of bitterness or resentment. Wow. And all it is unprocessed grief.
Wow. That's
and so
big.
If you can allow yourself to feel the feelings. So I always say thoughts are meant to be thought. Feelings are meant to be felt.
Okay.
So feelings have a purpose.
Yeah.
They are there to be felt.
Okay.
We don't like them.
Yeah.
Or at least we don't like the quote unquote bad ones. Like we don't want to feel sad. We don't want to feel mad. We don't want to feel fear. And so we will shut those down. But if you actually can allow yourself to feel those feelings and let them do their work in you.
Wow.
It creates a release and you can then move on.
Yeah.
From that disappointment. If you think about even the stages of grief, the final one is acceptance.
I know. I hate that one.
Yeah. Well,
that's my problem.
That's why I have issues. Supposed to be the good ones where you.
No, it's and accepting
all the ones
and really letting go. It's like accepting and knowing you're not. It's like you're not in control, and that's the space where I struggle.
Yeah,
because I want to be in control, and I think we all want to be in control, and we all want to be safe, and we all want to. So, like, I hear you. Think. Thoughts are meant to be thought and feelings are meant to be felt.
Yes.
I don't want to ever feel anxiety. I don't want to ever feel depression. I don't want to ever feel angry sometimes. I don't think it's a merited emotion. What do I do with those emotions?
Yeah. So I think sometimes those bigger emotions, like let's say anxiety and depression, right, are exacerbations, I don't know that that's the best word, of like a core feeling of sadness or fear. Like at the root of each one, you're going to have fear is at the root of anxiety. And what anxiety is I'm trying to do in order to avoid the fear. Like I'm trying to plan, I'm trying to do all these things, right?
Wow.
And I also I want to be careful with saying sometimes there are physiological symptoms that are associated with things. Like if we have actual like mental illness happening where something in your brain is off and you actually do need like medication or things like that for some of these bigger feelings.
Yeah.
But if we kind of take it, if I can add that disclaimer, but then we can still kind of look at what you're saying. I think it also goes back to most of the time, there's a core thing underneath what we consider the problem. So even you just demonstrated it really well of, I have these expectations on people and I get disappointed. So what's actually the problem? You want to be in control and you're not.
Yeah.
So it's actually not that I'm accepting that people have disappointed me. And that may be the path to get there. I actually have to get to a place where I accept and am okay that I am not in control, or that the only thing I'm in control of is me on my best day.
That's good.
I have zero control over any other person. I can have influence. I can, through my connection. But a stranger on the street, why should they do what I say? We don't have any connection. We don't have any influence. And if I expect them to do what I say, I need to investigate why. Like, what's going on inside of me, right? Now, my husband, I don't have control over him.
Right.
But I have invested in our connection so that if I say, hey, this bothers me, he wants to respond, not because I told him to, but because of our connection.
Wow.
Because he values not only our relationship, but me as a person. And that's the same thing we try to build in our children, right? Like, you want to face the fact that you have no control, like reproduce.
Wow. Yeah.
And then you have this baby
Right.
who has his whole own idea of what the whole
Right.
world is and how he's going to respond to all these things,
Right.
which is why you have to discipline and have boundaries as a parent, which is why we have timeout. It's why we have, I'm not going to give my 9-year-olds the keys to my van because they're not ready to drive a car.
Yeah.
They haven't actually hit the legal requirements, but they also developmentally and emotionally have not shown me that I can trust them with that. You know? And so I think a lot of times we have these symptoms and the actual core is I'm afraid of being out of control. So then asking yourself the question, well, what happens when I'm out of control or when I don't have control? And what do I need to feel safe?
Wow.
With the fact that I don't have control?
Wow. That's powerful.
Because the truth is you don't.
Right. Yeah. So you
and
tell
it feels scary.
Leaders, perfectionist leaders,
yes,
who are doing
yes
to eliminate their anxiety, you're not in control. I mean, you don't say those words, but ultimately, you're bringing healing to the idea that I'm in control and I have to get this done and it's all on my shoulders.
Yes. Yeah. So usually underneath all these different problems that we have are beliefs that we believe about ourselves, our wounds or even trauma from our own stories. You know, are these moments of I don't like this feeling, and so I'm doing all of these things just to avoid this, which is why it's not that your team is dysfunctional. Yeah. It's something on the inside. Yeah. Wow. Because if you can actually then fix the inside of you or grow the inside of you, because I don't like fix, but you're just growing as a person, you show up differently. Your team responds differently to you. Yeah. And so a lot of the external problems that we face in leadership are a result of our own deficiencies on the inside and our teams like, so if I'm coming broken, I'm leading a group of broken people absolutely who have their own whatevers, right? And so I have to become not better, but I have to grow myself on the inside so that I show up differently and then require different things of them.
That is so powerful. Wow. Okay. So what makes a person want to grow? Because even the word grow, I've been on this growth journey, elicits pain to me. Yes. You are saying it is better on the other side where there's growth, but you're going to have to go through pain. Yes. That's what I hear.
Yes. Yes. Nobody likes pain. I don't like pain. So let's not make it look like I'm some expert here who just bring it all on. No, hate it all. But I will say this. So I'm going to roundabout way answer your question. Okay. I have yet to meet anyone who doesn't want to grow.
Really?
In theory. Okay. Okay. But like I said before, we believe the lie that we can grow alone. Okay. The other lie I think we believe, or maybe thing that we confuse learning with growth.
I love
So
that. That's
learning,
powerful.
like
Oh my
people
gosh.
think, so what I hear people say is, I want to grow. I'm going to go take this course, listen to this podcast, read this book. And I'm not saying any of those things are bad. All I'm saying is all you're doing with that is learning new content.
That's
You're not actually
powerful.
growing.
Yeah.
So educational psychologists studied how people learn.
Okay.
And there are these different stages that you
Uh-huh.
go through. And so when you, hey, I need to, my team tells me I'm not a good communicator
Mm-hmm.
as a manager. I'm going to get better. So I go and I pick up a book about communication. I read that. I think I have now grown. All you've done is become aware,
That's intense.
which is the first stage.
That's so intense. Yeah.
Right? So I didn't know something. Now I know something.
Okay.
Second stage is where you start to ponder it. So I start to kind of think about it. I might notice it a little bit throughout my day. Oh, I wonder how I remember this like line from the book about communication. Then eventually I get to where I start to value it. Man, I'm going to read some more books about communication. I really love and value learning about communication. And we stop there and call it growth.
Wow.
And what actually happens after that third stage is you plummet off a cliff into this gap that's called, that people, educational psychologists will call the action behavior gap. And what you actually have to start to do is reprioritize your life to reflect the things that you now value. Because the ending stage, stage 5, is ownership. I now own and have become the thing that I'm growing in. But we stop at value.
You're like blowing my mind right now.
And so we say that I value communication. My husband and I went to a marriage retreat. We value intimacy. We value connection. We think our marriage is super important, but I actually haven't changed my day-to-day life to incorporate a date night because I don't want to pay a babysitter.
Wow.
I haven't changed our habits and interactions to, when he throws the towel on the floor, actually say, I feel annoyed when you do that.
Wow.
And then elicit his response.
Yeah.
And receive his response and then work through it as two broken people learning how to use a new tool and hurting each other in the process. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And so there's this whole gap of moving from saying that you value something to actually owning it.
Okay. So why not? Why don't people want to close
Because
the
that's
gap?
where the pain is.
Okay.
Because it requires intentionality.
Okay.
Because it requires massive energy. So your brain has these neural pathways. They're habits that you have.
Mm-hmm.
You have a ton of habits you don't even know about, right?
Yeah.
And so to make new ones, which is what changes, it requires massive intentionality and massive energy. Now, your brain doesn't like expending energy. So it's this catch-22 of your brain is actually designed to make new neural pathways for the rest of your life. The lie that our brain stops growing at a certain age is a lie. Like you can be 80 and you can be growing and making new neural pathways in your brain.
Okay.
So it is designed for that. It wants to conserve its energy.
Wow.
And so it doesn't want to expend the energy to form the new neural pathways, which is why it's so much easier when you lose your momentum in a new resolution or a new habit to just slip back into your old habits, because it follows these pathways that are already established and take less energy.
And that's where you're stuck.
And that's where you get stuck. Mm-hmm.
Everybody's stuck.
Here's the answer. It goes back to that first lie of the two things most required to establish those pathways in your brain, research has showed, is that you need intentional, repetitive practice over time. So that's you setting your intentions and just doing it, right?
Yeah.
And you're going to fail along the way. We think that progress looks like this. And it really is this, you know?
Yeah.
So that's the first one. The second one is you need people.
That's big.
You will grow faster and change quicker with people in your life than you will alone.
Ever. For anything.
So having a relationship with a coach, having a relationship with a mentor, having your life team in your life where you have someone who is keeping that intentional practice in front of you.
Wow.
And supporting you, because again, it's not a linear growth line. It's this like, we succeed, we fail.
Yeah.
We're continually going up, but all we feel are the ups and downs of it. And so having someone who can support you as you're going up that path
It's
like
paramount.
exponentially
Yeah.
increases your success. Now, we can all think about people in our life who've made that journey. When I listen to someone teach and I know it's from who they are, not just something that they've learned, we can all feel the difference.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
they're teaching who they are. It is something that they have bought and paid for. They own it
That's good.
now versus if I could go pick any leadership book. I could go read it and then probably teach a team about it. It won't be who I am.
Yeah.
But just because I'm smart and I have the skills to synthesize information, I can do that, but it's not ownership. And so it'll be very different when it comes out of who I am.
Wow.
Versus just what I know. Because again, I've crossed that gap and I've paid a price for this and I own it.
That's incredible. That is incredible. So you own being an executive coach.
Yeah.
Because you paid a price. I mean, you also sacrificed in the school and the learning but you own it.
Yeah, I remember very distinctly a point in grad school I think I went to a friend of mine and just broke down crying because I thought I knew so much and I thought I was good at this. And I had just learned so much more. So it's almost like you get to this point in learning where you learn all the things that you don't know.
So good, Laura.
And
you're blowing my mind.
you feel suddenly like this will take my entire life.
Right.
To figure this out.
Yeah.
You know, any professional in their field, I can think of anyone and they're the ones who are really good at it.
Yeah.
You know, but they will be the first to tell you there's so much more for me to learn.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so that's actually the first clue that you've broken that barrier and you're diving into that valley from those learning stages, right? You've moved past value.
That's so
because now you actually see with real eyes.
You experience it.
And you know
right.
you know the price to pay.
That's incredible.
And I like John Acuff says this. He goes, once you start seeing the benefit of something, you'll keep paying the price. So it's like once you start taking these steps, it's kind of why you stack goals. You know, once I can lift 10 pounds, man, maybe I can do 15. Now maybe I can do 20. Right. And when I start to feel the benefits of it, when I get through the first icky stages of, I don't like this is new and different. But when I see it impacting me, I then am motivated to keep going.
That's so powerful.
So like as a leader, when I see my team growing and changing, I'm now motivated to keep going.
That's incredible. Because you just explained the psychology behind marketing, honestly. Because marketing is, you sell the results. You sell the results. You want the outcomes. And because everybody wants to be at level 5. We stop at level 3.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm even having this memory of leaving college. What do we do in college? We gain so much knowledge. And my first job was at a consulting gig. And I remember walking around that company going, they didn't teach me this.
Yep.
Nobody taught me any of this. This is insane. I just spent so much money and I am not prepared.
Yeah.
Help me with that emotion. In order to get to level 5, to get to ownership, you have to go through the fear journey. It's like a valley of fear almost, or anxiety.
Yeah.
What is going on in my body what is going on? Because I want to tell you that anxiety is the enemy and is not my friend. And I feel like you wouldn't say that. So what would you say?
I don't know that I would. I think that there are times when it's not. I think anxiety, when you feel anxiety, if we can disassociate for a minute, it's just information that your body is trying to tell you. And so all of our emotions are connected to our brain. They all start in your brain. They don't start in your heart. They don't start they are things that start in your brain. And a lot of times, so like if we feel angry, usually that's a sign that some boundary has been crossed or you feel unsafe. Right? So if someone bumps into me at the grocery store and they're rude about it, you've crossed my personal space boundary. You've crossed a cultural boundary that we have here. I don't like that. It's not normal. You just sent me out of my normal safe environment. And so there's a little bit of what is happening is a fight or flight response.
Okay.
Because your emotions are connected to your brain and body's ability to keep you safe. So why do we feel anxiety? Because it's something new, something different. We don't know if it's going to hurt us. Right? Now, when those things prolong and go on, there's, I'm saying that's kind of like a core, and there's a lot of other nuances to it. But like same thing with, let's take sadness or something like that. There's some sort of loss.
That's so good.
That I feel.
Yeah.
And so sadness in and of itself is not good or bad. It's just information.
Yeah.
We associate it with certain things and we don't like it for whatever reason, There's lots of different reasons. Maybe we weren't allowed to feel feelings as a child. Maybe we think we're supposed to be happy all the time. I don't know.
Right.
There's a lot of different stories we tell ourselves about our feelings.
Right.
But at the end of the day, our feelings they're just information.
It's interesting.
And they're not logical because they're not thoughts.
Yeah.
Like they're not supposed to be.
Yeah.
And so most of our feelings are associated with some sort of information our body's trying to tell us.
That's super interesting. Okay, so talk to me about sadness, because that's an emotion that I have no grid for. I grew up in a household where we're happy. That's the emotion. Sadness doesn't have a place here. And when I look at the journey of leaders or, people who I aspire to be like Jesus, there's a wilderness. It's like a requirement, actually. I believe the wilderness season is a requirement. And I don't know that we know how to be in the wilderness because, first of all, what's your definition of a wilderness season? Do you think it's a requirement? And what's I don't even know how to navigate it because I go through seasons that I would designate as the wilderness. And I think it is from 3 to 5, and I want to hit it with a hammer.
So I think one thing to explore is what about the wilderness is making you want to hit it with a hammer? Is it that you're alone or feel alone? Is it the feelings themselves are uncomfortable? And so there can be a lot of different things within it. I think everyone goes through hard things in life. I think we live in a broken world. And I think for me, one of the things that's hardest for me to do is integrate. When I can see the ideal and what is supposed to be with what is reality. Because I see reality really easily. And when there's injustice, it's really hard for me to mesh the two because I know what's supposed to be, right? Children aren't supposed to go hungry.
Right.
People aren't supposed to be homeless.
Right.
All of these different things. And when I have a hard time integrating the reality of, well, it just is, right? So I think sometimes in our wilderness, it really is integrating these parts of ourselves that different things in our story and our belief system have caused to be separate. Right. And doing the work of kind of unpacking that and allowing that integration and that joining to happen. And I think for me, that usually comes out with a lot of anger.
Okay.
Because there feels like this injustice. I think it can also come out as sadness too.
Yeah.
And so one of the things I think is really important for leaders, no matter what season you find yourself in, is really growing in that emotional intelligence. Sometimes we have to start with being able to name and recognize our feelings before we even let ourselves feel them.
Okay.
And so I know a lot of people who I'll say, well, what are you feeling? Well, I think that this is stupid. Okay, that's not a feeling, that's a thought. What are you feeling?
Yeah.
Well, I think you should stop asking me this question. Okay, it sounds like you're angry. Are you angry? Well, no, I'm just frustrated. Okay, what's making you frustrated? So actually getting to where we can first name them and then getting to where we feel safe enough to feel them.
Interesting.
And I think sometimes because we've labeled some feelings good and some feelings bad, we think that we are bad if we feel sad or afraid.
Exactly.
And I think the lie that we've all been sold is we think courage looks like being fearless. And I think courage is doing the thing that you want to do and are called to do and know you're supposed to do, even when your knees are shaking, even when you can't sleep the night before.
Right.
I think that's what courage actually is.
Yeah.
But we've been sold the rom-com version of an emotionally healthy life.
That's so good.
And I don't think it's true.
That's powerful.
And I think if we can acknowledge it and feel it, and then create space for other people to feel it.
Right.
Like, even if we go to the Bible, we look at Jesus coming to the tomb of Lazarus, right? What does he do? He weeps.
Right. Yeah.
He had resurrection life inside of him.
Yeah.
Now, whether he knew he was going to raise Lazarus in that moment, I don't know.
Yeah.
But he attuned to his friends and entered into their grief.
That's good.
And allowed himself to feel it, and not like play weeping. I think he literally entered in and felt the sorrow and the grief, and the physical response was weeping.
Yeah.
At the loss of his friend.
Wow.
Whether he knew he was going to raise him or not in that moment.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so I think this idea of a strong leader is someone who never looks afraid or never is angry or never is sad, I think is unfair to who we were designed to be.
Right.
And it actually cripples us. It handicaps us.
That's so good.
To not have that emotional
That's really
connection,
good.
Intelligence.
That's brilliant. Yeah. No, I think that's critical to be a powerful leader, is having emotional intelligence and knowing how to navigate your emotions. Obviously, that's how you set your mind.
Yeah. And I think we even think about, right, that it makes us look weak, or we're going to become the like wishy-washy person who cries with everyone, like that kind of thing. Whereas if you could think about any of the jobs that you've worked, and like, let's say that you came in and you were just having we've all had hard days, right? Maybe you didn't get a client you thought you were supposed to get, or maybe a project blew up, or maybe you're in the medical field and you lost a patient.
Right.
What would it do for you if your boss in that moment didn't come to coddle or anything like that, but just came alongside you and sat in the well with you?
Right.
And like, that's a big bummer that client didn't come through.
Yeah.
I'm really sorry that happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can see the disappointment on your face. And then they could encourage or challenge or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I think if we think about that, what that would do for us as people, because it would help us see we're not alone. And so much, I think we fear these emotions because we don't want to go through them alone.
That's good.
We don't want to feel them because they feel scary, but they also feel isolating. And so if people can come alongside us and be like, man, Jenny, that's really scary to start your own podcast.
Or whatever the thing.
Yeah. Like, gosh, I love the idea that you have, and I can see the passion. I think I can see that you're really scared. I'm with you.
Yeah, that's powerful.
You know,
comfort.
You don't have to do it alone. I think it just shifts a lot of things, changes a lot of things.
Yeah, well, it even makes me think the world needs to be a more compassionate place, right? If we knew, I have this core belief, and I bring it to people that are in leadership roles or counselor types. So I'm going to bring it to you and see your response. Because I brought it to this counselor once, and he looked at me like I was insane. And I was like, I think it's true. I have a core belief that everybody's in pain.
Yes.
I have a core belief that everybody's in pain, and you don't know why they're doing what they're doing. So you cannot judge them.
And what a revolutionary, like we're talking about setting your mind, right? What a revolutionary way to do that if we adjusted our expectation of people and put that kind of belief or assumption.
Yeah.
If I assume that everyone's going through something hard, or has at least at some point in their life experienced pain or something hard.
Yeah.
If I allow that to change my mindset, how do I show up differently?
Yeah.
How do I interact differently with just strangers on the street? I immediately have, even if I'm not at 100%, I immediately have 10% more compassion, 20%.
Right.
If I can actually allow that to become my mindset as when I look at people.
That's good. Wow.
how much kinder we would
Yeah.
be to each other,
Yeah.
and how much we would grow
Mm-hmm.
as leaders and even just as individuals
Yeah.
in our capacity for emotional intelligence.
And that's so powerful. You are so on fire. I have a testimony I'm going to share, and then I'm going to let you finish everything. But when I was first walking with Jesus, I said, how do you love everybody? How do you love everyone? They're difficult. You know, I mean, if we're
They are.
honest, this person's annoying or
Yes.
whatever the emotion. But I was fixated on some of the scriptures where it's like, love your enemy and pray for them. It's like, what are you talking about? This is a complete paradigm shift. This is a complete mind change. And I remember like beating at the door. I don't understand. And I heard because I know them.
Mm.
And so when I think about people and our interactions with each other,
Mm-hmm.
God knows
Mm-hmm.
why they did something mean or why they did something stupid or why they're on the drugs or on the whatever.
Yeah.
And I try to carry that that mindset of if I'm judgy or if I want to be condemning or if I want to be in a negative emotion space towards somebody,
Mm-hmm.
it's because I just don't know them.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Is that the same as ownership?
I think it could be. I think what you're describing is, let me say it this way. As I've gotten older, I only have more empathy for people.
Okay.
I think there are other areas where I probably feel more jaded as I get older, but as I've gotten older and interacted with more people, I think I've experienced the very thing that you've said of, when I have a hard time interacting with someone, if I actually just get to know them and hear their story,
Yeah.
a lot of times I can find those pain points
Mm.
in them. You know,
Right.
even people who have been difficult or mean to me or,
Right.
you know, and I think one great example I can think of is like even learning different stories in my family
Mm.
raised this empathy for different things that I probably had maybe some hardness about or different things like that. But I think as you hear people's stories, you can't, and if you're really listening, you can't help but see them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when we see people,
Mm.
when we don't see the ideology or the label or what they did to me, but when I see the person,
Yeah.
I think it can't help but change my mindset towards them.
Wow.
Especially when they're being vulnerable and authentic with their story.
Yeah.
And I think we start to see that truth of everyone experiences some degree of hard.
Yeah.
Just because your hard is harder
Yeah.
than my hard doesn't
Yeah.
make it better, worse, or anything. It's still hard, you know?
Mm.
And so we've all had to go through something. We
Yeah.
don't have to coddle each other, but we can show compassion
Yeah.
towards each other.
That's beautiful. I love it. Is there anything that we didn't cover? I know we were talking about purpose.
Yeah.
Do you go there with your clients? I mean, because purpose to me, I want to hear your definition of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want you to dive deeper into it because I can't even begin to imagine such a broad topic. And if somebody comes to you, I'm a leader and I
Sure.
want results.
Yeah.
I need better communication or relationships. And how do we get to purpose?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I think that's sometimes the tricky part with leadership coaching is people are coming because they have a problem
Mhm.
or there's some sort of deliverable that you need. And I'm
Mhm.
just sitting here talking about all these intangibles.
Right.
And so I think that's the practicality side of it of, right, here's the context,
Uh-huh.
here's the understanding, but how do we create practical moments to move you towards your goals
Yep.
in light of growing in all of these intangibles as well.
Right.
So weaving those in with it. But I think we make purpose really, really complicated. We have vision, mission, all these things, and everyone argues over what's what and how do you define them.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so simple as saying, what do you want to do and why do you want to do it?
I love that.
So simplifying it, that becomes the core.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just have to figure out the how. And I say this all the time is we often start with the how.
Mm-hmm.
And the danger with that is that there's 1,000 different ways to accomplish one
Right.
purpose.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different practical steps you can take,
Right.
directions you can take,
Yeah.
actionable items that you can. And if you don't clarify what you want to do, and more importantly, why do you want to do it?
Yeah.
If you live in the how, then the how is going to dictate. And so then the how is going to change based on the circumstances that you find yourself in.
Right.
But if I'm actually really clear on what my company does and why it exists, what I do, what my department does and why it exists, then that becomes my focus.
Okay.
And then I build the how out of that.
Interesting. You build the how, which is the tactical.
Yeah, what you do.
Yeah. Out of the mission and vision and the whatever it is. Okay.
Yeah.
So do you find leaders? Because to me, leaders, to be in the position of leadership, you have to spiritually be pretty mature mostly, I would hope. Am I wrong?
You would hope.
Yeah. And I say spiritual because we're talking about the intangibles.
Sure.
For a quality leader, I would hope that you have a lot of your intangibles in place and set already.
Yes, if I'm going to promote someone in a leadership position, I want to know what's going on the inside of them. Now, not everybody's like me.
Yeah.
And so some people get promoted because they're connected. So we've all also experienced bad leaders who've been promoted who probably shouldn't be. But in an ideal world, yes, your internal growth should mirror your corporate ladder climb, for lack of a better analogy.
Right.
But your authority and influence should increase as your internal capacity grows in an ideal world.
Interesting. Do you think that's a law, like a spiritual law as we grow?
I don't know if I would call it a law. I think it has consequences if you don't do it.
Okay.
And so I think a lot of if we can all think of like bad bosses that we've had or different negative experiences that way is probably the result of giving someone authority who didn't have the internal structure to carry it.
Yeah.
Leaders who fall in the church. Corruption within CEOs and C-suites within, that starts on the inside.
Wow. And so you're going after that ultimately.
Yeah, I think that is one of the frameworks that I really use. Now, we do it in a lot of practical, like I just worked with a client around a presentation she was doing, but what kind of came up with was some of her like perfectionism and nervousness around it. And so that starts to be that internal work with something that's very, very practical.
That's awesome. I love that. I love the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Because it's getting people out of self and into higher purpose.
Yes. Yeah. And I think when you can be motivated by something greater than yourself, I think all of us have that to a degree within us. It's all going to look a little different.
Yeah.
We all want our life to mean something.
I know. It's universal.
And it doesn't have to be, I'm going to be president or I'm going to like rid the world of world hunger.
Right.
But we all want to have some sort of impact in the world around us. And I think when we can connect with that and identify like what we kind of talked about at the beginning of our uniqueness to it, of that I am uniquely me. And so there is something unique that I bring to the world that no one else will bring. And if I don't show up as me, then the world is missing that.
What would inhibit you from being you?
Oh, I think comparison. I think not valuing who I am. Like if the world tells me what I carry isn't, like if our culture says rest isn't valuable or this isn't valuable or this isn't valuable, right? Then we sometimes are driven to perform.
I love that.
Or show up a different way. If we have wounds or trauma from like our story, we'll show up differently.
Wow. I could talk to you for another hour, but I think we're going to close it up because that was so interesting.
Yeah.
Just talking about trauma and leadership. I mean, there's so many elements in life because what you're tapping into is the fullness of life to me.
Yeah. It's abundance. How do you
live
fully
leadership?
present?
Yeah.
Fully as yourself.
Yeah.
Fully at home with yourself. Like I accept me. I can manage myself in the world.
Yeah.
whether people accept me or not.
Right.
I can identify and claim my unique purpose, hone my individual strengths, influence those around me.
Wow.
To really go after those things and to see those things become reality. And it isn't just talk. It's not stopping at value. It's becoming the message. It's owning it
I love that.
and actually seeing it happen in reality.
Yeah. I think it's faith.
Yeah. That's
It's
beautiful.
faith. I mean, as I've gone on my journey and as I've walked into the darkness of the unknown, and as I've talked to so many different entrepreneurs and so many different innovative leaders, I realized that the one thing that really unites us is faith. You're going for the unseen, believing that it can be seen, you know? So I love that you are helping facilitate the growth and the strength of quality leaders because leaders create culture.
Leaders do create culture. It's really fun. I really love what I do.
I love it. So how would people get in touch with you if they want to?
Yeah. My website is a work in progress. So the best way would be to email me.
Okay.
Which is just Laura C. Armour.
Okay. And I'll put that in the comments. So
yeah.
Thank you for coming. I loved our conversation.
This was fun.
It was good talking to you. Okay. Well, awesome.